In the flickering darkness of a city under siege, the wail of air raid sirens sliced through the night like a blade, pulling families from their beds into damp shelters, where the air grew thick with fear, and the distant thunder of explosions shook the earth. This was total war, not the clash of armies on distant fields, but the total mobilization of entire societies, where civilians became both targets and instruments of survival. The bombs did not discriminate between soldier and mother, factory worker and child. What unfolded across Europe and Asia in the mid-20th century marked one of history's most profound ruptures, the moment when the boundary between battlefield and home front dissolved forever, reshaping the very fabric of human existence. Yet before the skies filled with death, life had carried on in rhythms that now seem almost impossibly fragile. The world had known war before, but nothing prepared civilians for the scale of total war. In the aftermath of the Great War's trenches, nations vowed never again, yet economic despair and rising ideologies fueled a new and more terrifying conflict. By the late 1930s, the machinery of modern states turned inward, transforming factories, schools, and kitchens into extensions of the war effort. Propaganda posters urged every citizen to do their part, while governments rationed food, fuel, and clothing with clinical precision. Daily life before the full storm still held echoes of normalcy. Children walked to school under clear skies, families gathered for meals, and lovers strolled city streets lined with cafes and theaters. The scent of fresh bread mingled with morning fog, and radios played music that masked the growing unease. But beneath this surface, the invisible machinery of destruction was already turning. Early warning signs appeared in subtle disruptions that few recognized as harbingers of collapse. Shortages of imported goods created the first empty shelves, while newspapers carried increasingly urgent headlines about distant mobilizations. Blackout drills turned evenings into eerie voids, where streetlights vanished and windows were sealed with heavy curtains. Whispers spread through neighborhoods about friends called up for service, and factories shifted from producing toys and automobiles to tanks and aircraft. No one yet understood the full implications, but tension simmered in quiet conversations and restless nights. The collapse did not begin with chaos. It began quietly, in the gradual erosion of the ordinary, where routine slowly gave way to preparation, and the horizon darkened with unseen threats. As war declarations echoed across parliaments and radio waves, rising tension gripped civilian populations like an invisible hand. Cities organized civil defense units, children practiced evacuation drills, and women took up positions in munitions plants, their hands stained with grease and metal shavings. Families said goodbye at train stations heavy with the weight of uncertainty. Suitcases clutched tightly as trains carried husbands and sons toward uncertain fates. Ration books became treasured possessions, exchanged for meager portions of meat, sugar, and butter. The air itself seemed heavier, filled with the metallic tang of fear and the constant hum of propaganda urging resilience. Instability crept into every corner of life, from lengthening queues outside shops to the growing scarcity of everyday items that once defined comfort and stability. Key decisions made in distant war rooms cascaded into the daily existence of millions. Leaders chose strategies of total mobilization, demanding sacrifices that tested the limits of human endurance. In Britain, the Blitz turned London into a crucible of fire and rubble, while across the continent, entire populations faced evacuation, relocation, and the constant threat of invasion. Mistakes compounded under pressure, over-reliance on outdated defenses, delayed responses to intelligence, and the brutal calculus of prioritizing military production over civilian needs. Families adapted by planting victory gardens in backyards and parks, tending vegetables under moonlight to avoid detection from above. Children learned to identify aircraft by silhouette, their games transformed into grim rehearsals for survival. The pressure mounted relentlessly, forging a society where every action carried the potential to tip the balance between endurance and despair. The moment the system began to fail arrived not with a single cataclysm, but through accumulating fractures that widened into chasms. Bombing campaigns shattered infrastructure, leaving streets cratered and homes reduced to skeletal frames. Water and electricity became unreliable luxuries, while hospitals overflowed with the wounded and burned. In bombed-out districts, survivors sifted through ruins for remnants of their former lives, the acrid smell of smoke clinging to their clothes like a second skin. Supply lines collapsed under relentless assault, turning rationing into starvation in some regions. By the time the signs became unmistakable, empty markets, mass graves, and the hollow eyes of refugees, it was already too late for many. The intricate web of civilian society, once seamless, unraveled thread by thread under the relentless weight of total war. Human consequences manifested in profound social breakdown that tore at the bonds holding communities together. Families fractured as parents disappeared into factories or battlefields, leaving children to navigate a world of fear and deprivation. Black markets flourished in alleyways where desperate individuals traded heirlooms for food or medicine, eroding trust and morality. Grief became a constant companion, whispered in the quiet moments between sirens, when the true cost of each raid settled like dust on the survivors. Psychological strain revealed itself in sleepless nights, haunted by memories of collapsing buildings and the cries of the trapped. Neighbors who once shared community turned inward, hoarding what little they had, while others formed unlikely alliances, forged in the shared crucible of suffering. The collapse of normalcy exposed both the depths of human cruelty and the extraordinary resilience of ordinary people facing extraordinary horror. In the ruins of cities like Dresden, Stalingrad, and Tokyo, the human toll became etched into the landscape itself. Civilians endured not only physical destruction, but the erosion of identity and purpose. Schools closed or transformed into shelters, childhoods stolen by labor and loss. Women, once confined to traditional roles, managed households, tended the wounded, and operated heavy machinery, their strength a quiet revolution born of necessity. Yet beneath these adaptations lay profound trauma, the silence after raids broken only by distant weeping, the pervasive stench of decay in unburied districts, and the haunting absence of loved ones whose fates remained unknown. Social structures strained to the breaking point as class distinctions blurred in shared shelters and communal kitchens, revealing both solidarity and the raw undercurrents of competition for survival. The long-term historical impact of civilian life during total war extended far beyond the cessation of hostilities. Entire generations carried invisible scars, shaping post-war societies in ways both visible and subterranean. The experience accelerated technological and social changes, from advancements in medicine born of battlefield necessity to the reconfiguration of gender roles that influenced decades of policy. Cities rebuilt with modernist urgency, yet the psychological landscape remained fractured, feeding into new ideologies and conflicts. The concept of total war itself became a cautionary legacy, demonstrating how modern states could harness entire populations toward destruction with terrifying efficiency. What civilians endured redefined the relationship between government and citizen, embedding surveillance, welfare systems, and collective memory into the foundations of emerging nations. Reflections on those years reveal a haunting truth about the fragility of civilization. The routines that once anchored daily existence, morning tea, evening stories, weekend markets, dissolved under the pressure of systemic failure, exposing how quickly society can pivot from prosperity to survival. Survivors spoke of nights when the sky burned orange with incendiaries, of communities that both fractured and mended in the face of annihilation. The war did not end neatly. Its echoes lingered in displaced populations, economic ruins, and the collective trauma that influenced art, literature, and politics for generations. In the quiet aftermath, as reconstruction began amid the rubble, humanity confronted the irreversible costs of total mobilization. Yet even in the depths of collapse, moments of profound humanity persisted, strangers sharing shelter and songs to drown out the bombs, children inventing games amid debris, and quiet acts of defiance against despair. These fragments of light amid darkness underscored the resilience embedded in the human spirit, even as entire ways of life vanished forever. The experience of civilians in total war stands as a somber testament to the thin line separating order from chaos, comfort from catastrophe. As new generations inherit this history, the sirens of the past serve as a perpetual warning, their wail echoing through time to remind us that no society is immune to the forces that once consumed the world in fire and shadow. The collapse was not merely of buildings and economies, but of illusions about progress and safety, leaving behind a world forever marked by the memory of what ordinary people endured when everything familiar was taken from them.